Hello YouTube, welcome to the much requested calisthenics video. In this segment, I'm going to lay it bare to you guys. I'm going to give you my opinion surrounding the practice, all of the tips and advices I have for you if you want to use it for hypertrophy, and overall a presentation of the topic and the subject, because calisthenics are an integral part of the fitness industry. It's everywhere, and it's everywhere for a reason. Is because it has managed to create a presence that is unavoidable, because it is by itself unavoidable. It is tough to ignore calisthenics. At some point you have to pay attention to that, and I want to share why with you. So first off, I have a fairly lengthy experience with calisthenics, because when I started training, that's all I did. And for me, it's all I did because it was the only thing I could do. And I could barely do it. When I started, just moving my body was already a task. And therefore, I really didn't have a choice. I had to start with it because I had to give a chance to my body to adapt. And therefore, I spent a long time just doing push-ups, sit-ups, some dips, etc. Because for people who start out very weak and very frail, calisthenics is your best friend because it's your only friend. Resistance training through weight is extremely difficult when lifting an empty bar is already impossible. And therefore, you'll see that when it comes to novices, I personally find that calisthenics are incredibly suitable, but they're not just reserved for novices. So when we're talking about calisthenics, what are we talking about exactly? Well, calisthenics are the movements that the body can undertake with itself, meaning that these are movements that from the get-go are body weight. You weight them afterwards, but the origin of the patterns are body weight based, meaning that technically a squat with no bar on your back or no load is calisthenics. Okay, a lunge is calisthenics. I know a lot of people have now this idea in their head that it only concerns certain movements like the pull-ups, etc. But there's no distinction between a pull-up and a squat. At the end of the day, you're using your own body as weight. You're using the own weight of your corpse as resistance training. The body moves the body. This by itself already explains why calisthenics are so popular, but I'll get to that later. It's both a deeply philosophical concept and also one of the most effective use of what you were gifted, because you're literally growing mass using pre-existing mass. That in itself is beautiful. But that's what I'm going to be referring to when I talk about calisthenics. So it's all of these movements, it englobates all of them. Not all of them are good or suitable to do for hypertrophy. And that also is something to keep in mind. Please, I'm talking about bodybuilding here, okay? I'm not talking about pure calisthenics or strength or performance. You will see that the distinction needs to be made because a lot of people don't grasp that there is a difference, and the difference is really important to make and to establish. So that's calisthenics. When we are looking at the branches of calisthenics, you have two distinct choices. You have two distinct schools. You have body weight only, and you have weighted. But in reality, these are married, right? They go hand in hand for one simple reason. If you get stronger at weighted calisthenics, you'll get better at calisthenics. If you get better at bodyweight calisthenics, you'll get better at weighted. You will see that the carryover is not as evident. There's one side that is much more potent than the other when it comes to making you stronger. Wink, wink, it's the one where you actually load the movement, because that of course makes sense, but it's not like it's two different things. And it's not like someone who's really good at weighted calisthenics would suck at body weight. It doesn't work like that. It actually is synergistic to a very high extent, much more than a lot of carryover movements that variations of barbell movement can offer. So that's a good thing, because calisthenics end up being a package. You end up doing movements that are going to complement each other to such an extent that calisthenics by themselves exist as just a sport. It's a practice, right? If you say I do calisthenics, people immediately know which movement you do. And they also know that if you say that, most likely you're good at all of them, because it is very possible. And that is interesting when you think about it, because any other sport that tests strength is going to have to limit itself. Because you can't ask the athlete to be strong at everything. It's just not realistic. But calisthenics sort of manages to do that because it truly is going to be the ability of the body to move its entirety, all of the joints, all of the muscles, all of the members, etc., etc. Some portions do not receive as much love, and we'll see why. So, this is just for the introduction. After that, let's talk about bodyweight calisthenics. Bodyweight calisthenics is an excellent way to start, okay? I'll explain why. But since it's an excellent way to start, it's also going to be limited at some point. And the explanation is very simple. If you understand programming and you understand the baseline, when you are moving your own body, you are constantly moving the same weight, right? The only way that's not true is if you load or you do a variation where you modify the lever so that you make it harder. But if you do the same lift, it's always the same lift, meaning that at some point progression becomes tough because the movement becomes too easy. Take the push-up, for example. Once you get to a stage where you can comfortably rep 20 push-ups, this is the time where you're supposed to load, be it with weighted push-ups or with bench or dips, meaning that you'll have to actually go outside of calisthenics. And this is where a lot of people fail. A lot of people start with calisthenics, but they never graduate from it for reasons I'm going to explain. Most of the time because they have developed an attachment to it. And if that's the case, it's good for you. If that's something you love, please, by all means, keep doing it. But it's limited for hypertrophy because at some point you need an absolute load. You need to actually start progressively overloading. And of course, there are means to do that. You can do difficult variations of the push-up. You can do planche push-ups. You can do any type of movement that is going to make it more difficult for you to move the body. But a lot of the time, these don't end up being more difficult muscular-wise. It's more difficult technically-wise. And this is the heart of calisthenics. Calisthenics is a skill-based sport. Yes, sure, calisthenic athletes are really strong. They also look really good. But the most important thing is skill. And the same goes for Olympic weightlifting or rings. Yeah, those guys are monstrously strong, but you know what they really have in spades? Technique. Their technique is amazing. And it's the reason why, if you look at those three sports I just cited, they all have the same thing in common. They practice the same movement again, and again. Why? They need to keep the technical rating high. If you don't know what a technical rating is, check the description. But pretty much, it's the reason why also it's okay for calisthenic athletes to continuously repeat those same movements and never actually load it with something that is going to not be a calisthenic movement. It's because they don't need to. What they need to is they need to develop their strength at the movement and stay specific. And therefore, they're going to practice it day in and day out. Just like an Olympic weightlifter is going to snatch and clean and jerk all the time. He's going to build his strength on other movements, but the meat and potatoes of the program is his key movement for a reason, technical rating. So that's that. The issue and the limiting factors you're going to encounter with bodyweight calisthenics, as I said, are going to be the volume. It's tough to accumulate quality volume when you're only lifting your body. It's tough to progress also because if you constantly do just sets of push-ups, how do you push the intensity? How do you experience the type of stress that is going to lead to an ability to load? You're not even loading in the first place. So this is a real issue, okay? And then it's going to be also the legs. And the legs is sort of the contentious topic with calisthenics. I know that calisthenics guys are sort of sensitive around the topic of legs. And I'm not putting you down when I say that. I understand why you have small legs. It's not a glitch, it's a feature. When you are focused on calisthenics, you are going to be upper body dominant by default because a lot of the lifts and movements you do require a strong upper body. But by connection, this also means that if you can manage to have the smallest lower body possible, then you will be more performant because you have less of a weight to drag with you. So that's fine. It's okay to have small legs. I continuously see calisthenic guys who get upset at this, who try to explain that, oh no, the leg workout is tough. Bro, don't feel forced or obligated to justify why you don't like why you don't like big legs, or why you don't want big legs. It makes sense. For your pursuit, it makes total sense. You don't have to offer explanations to anyone, okay? But for the bros out there who are going to want to do calisthenics and who also want big legs, you're going to have to do something different. This is my personal opinion. When I program with calisthenics and I have to program for legs, I'm always at a loss. Because why do I program? Do I program pistol shrimps and all of that stuff? That's technical. Yeah, you need to be strong, but you also need to be technical to be good at these lifts. And it's not going to build much mass. Therefore, I'm forced to do stuff like good mornings with bands, squat with bands, and that's just not efficient. I would much rather have the guy do deadlifts and squats. And therefore, this is a weakness. And it's something that is not really arguable because if you look at top level calisthenic athletes, they have small legs. And I know that some people are going to cite me, certain guys on YouTube Fitness. I can tell you one thing, they all have small legs. Okay, they might take pictures when they are definition, but if you look at the absolute size of the leg, it's small. And again, it's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's segue, because I know I upset some of you guys, so I now want to say something positive about calisthenics. Let's segue into the novice aspect of calisthenics. Because if you look at my novice program, I include calisthenics. If you look at the calisthenic only program I did, I of course include calisthenics. But I have a strong focus on the movements. Why? Because I think they are essential, not optional, essential. You cannot turn your back on calisthenics. It's the reason why this is the title I chose for this video. It's because it's a regret of mine and I want to make sure that you don't do that. And so I want to infuse young lifters with the feeling of calisthenics. And why is it so important? Well, first off, the ability to move the body in space without holding onto a weight or moving a weight needs to be developed first. To me, that's essential. Proprioception needs to be worked from the base. And the base is what? Moving the body. When you look at most people in real life, they can barely move their body as is. They struggle to walk, they struggle to navigate life, and therefore you can't just put a barbell on their back and say, okay, squat this. To me, that is, it's a lack of foresight. And therefore, I would much prefer, yes, maybe starting with compound so that they can accumulate a lot of tonnage, but also give them some calisthenic movements, maybe some hair squat, maybe some push-ups, etc., to build a base. Calisthenics build an incredible base. And therefore, I want novice to get a taste of it. Because if you start and you try to get into calisthenics, when you're intermediate, it's going to be much harder and you're going to have lost on very easy gains and fun gains. Because calisthenics is fun. I know some people don't like it. For me, I get lost in it. Because it's just me and my body. It's me moving my body. And therefore, it's something that I recommend. I always recommend calisthenics for novices. And on top of that, a lot of the movements are going to, one, have carryover to the barbell movements, and two, they're going to really help with injury prevention. Meaning that I firmly believe that if you take someone and you start them up with bench press, they have a much higher chance of hurting a shoulder than someone who started with push-up. Because the push-up is going to teach you how to push. It's going to teach you how to recruit the chest. For people who do bench press all the time and you never feel your chest, stop doing bench press for a while, do push-ups. Get good at push-ups, return to the bench, tell me how your chest feels. You're going to feel it. Now it's working. Why? It's almost impossible to do push-ups and not feel your chest. And therefore, just starting with them is it's perfect. And on top of that, it's low impact, it's easy to do, you don't have to have a lot of material. So it's just the most excellent introduction into lifting that anyone can have. And as I said at the start, it's also just evidence. You want to be able to move the body. If you're on the floor and you need to stand up quick, are you going to roll onto your back and then like struggle like a turtle? No, you do a push-up, you put your legs and you like sprint up. That's how it's done. But what if you can't do a push-up? Now you're stuck. Same for a squat. Just to pick up something from the ground, how to do a proper hip hinge or knee flexion. That's calisthenics, right? That's something I give to calisthenic guys. A lot of these movements are natural. And by natural, I don't mean functional. Okay, that's different. This is a topic for a different video. But when it comes to nature, the movements that the body naturally do, that's calisthenics for you. All right? And then the loaded application of calisthenics become barbell movements and compound movements. But at the start, at the genesis, it's calisthenics. So if you master calisthenics, you can have a very strong base for the future. But of course, as I said, this is limited. And at some point, you're going to have to start doing other things. But some guys never do. Some guys just stick to calisthenics for the rest of their life. And again, that's a choice. But if you do that, keep in mind one thing. If you decide to make calisthenics your life pursuit, you are now chasing performance. This is non-negotiable. This is now your life. It's a sport, and it's a sport that's focused on performance. All right, some would call it a strength sport, some a skill sport. Doesn't matter. It's still based on performance. How can you perform with the body? If that's your thing, by all means do it. But if your goal at the start was bodybuilding and to look good, you might be limiting yourself. You might, okay? I said you might. Because at the end of the day, you can also build an amazing body with calisthenics. Especially the upper body. Some of those guys have tremendous physiques, right? Up top, nothing to say about that. As I said, down below, it's a different question altogether. The reason why you don't need big legs as a calisthenic athlete, as I say, is because you don't use it. But a lot of people don't think about it right, I feel. And they say, oh, calisthenic athletes have small legs. Okay, but what are we talking about when we say small legs? Because it's not just the legs. And in reality, if you look at the entirety of the musculature of the leg, the quad, that a lot of people would say is responsible for the leg size, is the most developed out of all of calisthenic athletes. Why? They do one leg squats, they do shrimp squats, all of that stuff. And yes, it's also due to the fact that they tend to be lighter, but at the end of the day, this still develops muscle. Okay? So why do I still say that they have small legs? Well, for one reason. The area that is the least developed is the hamstring, the glute, and the lower back, aka the posterior chain. These tend to be weak points in calisthenic athletes. For one simple reason. How often do you do a hip hinge as a calisthenic athlete? Never. So it's not a movement that is trained. And on top of that, if you decided to train it for, I don't know, just for shit and giggles, now you have a lot of muscle here that you're supposed to pull, that you're supposed to balance when you do all of these things when you're suspended in the air. This makes you a worse calisthenic athlete. So in reality, if you end up trying to pursue the two at the same time, you're going to be disappointed. But this is not really a problem because a lot of calisthenic athletes, quote unquote, don't do that. They only pursue calisthenics. They never train the rest, and that's good. That's good until you realize that they're doing that just for the physique. And if you're doing that just for the physique, I'm sorry to say it, you're not a calisthenic athlete. You can be called a calisthenic bro, but your pursuit is not performance, and therefore you cannot be called a calisthenic athlete. And it's the same for bodybuilders. If you met a bodybuilder and he told you, oh, I do curls to be stronger at curls, okay, you're not a bodybuilder, right? You're not doing it just for the form, you're not doing it just for the aesthetic, you're doing it for performance. And therefore there's a mismatch here. And this is a disconnect that I think confuses a lot of people outside of the community and inside of the community, because you get the sense that there are guys who are lost. They do calisthenics, but they don't really know why. And if they were just honest with themselves and they could tell themselves, hey, I do it because I like to look good, then all of the problems would be just fixed, solved. But they like to delude themselves into thinking that they're in it for the performance aspect, and that creates a cognitive dissonance that tends to be dangerous and tends to really be a weight on these people's psyche and just enthusiasm in general. It's the reason why they also tend to be the most combative when it comes to defending calisthenics, when in reality a lot of the guys I personally know who are into it just for the calisthenic aspect don't give a fuck. Yeah, you can tell them, oh, you have small legs, cool, I can still do 50 pull-ups. Doesn't matter if they have small legs. So that's that. And if we're going to look at qualities, the confusing of skill for hypertrophy is extremely prevalent. It's not just calisthenic athletes, I'm not just targeting you. A lot of people don't get it, that hypertrophy is a different quality altogether. But it's normal that they don't get it because you can acquire hypertrophy through other means. It's the reason why, as I said, a lot of calisthenic athletes look pretty juicy up top. They have strong abs, strong chest, strong arms, strong shoulders, etc., etc. Why? For one simple reason. Calisthenic movements are extremely good for hypertrophy. They are going to make you look good. That's it, period. It truly is the case. Meaning that if you've decided that you want to use calisthenic movements for your upper body, you can. That works. It's still like aligned with bodybuilding. That being said, again, if you also want big legs, you're going to have to deal with certain problems because, as I said, people who chase performance are going to do everything to stay performance. So they're going to keep their legs small on purpose, and they're going to stay relatively low in body fat. A lot of these guys are extremely shredded, right? They're really lean. Why? Is it because they want to look good? Maybe, but a portion of that is also because it makes them better. Because the less weight you have to move, to pull, to stabilize, the better you are. And at some point, you find out that it's less a question of strength and more a question of pound for pound strength. How well can you move your body at this weight? How well could you move your body if you were 5 pounds heavier? That's the real question. Okay, this is something to keep in mind. If you bulk, if you put a lot of muscle mass on your posterior chain, this is going to have an impact on your performance. Can you take that? Can you handle that? As someone who's into calisthenics, are you going to be happy with seeing your pull-up numbers go down? If you say no, then maybe just stick to calisthenics. Because at the end of the day, it's a worthy pursuit. But all of these guys tend to be light, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't quite get. A lot of the guys on YouTube who have extremely shredded physiques, they tend to be in the 160, 170s. And that's light. That's 40 pounds lighter than I am. And that's normal, it's their sport. But keep in mind also that if you were to put them next to someone who bodybuilds, they would look small. Because at the end of the day, the fat that should be on their frame, that would be on their frame if they were just focused on aesthetics, isn't there. They focus on performance. And therefore, they have to sacrifice something because you can't have everything. Too many calisthenic guys, calisthenic fanboys, think they can have everything. So they'll tell you, oh, calisthenic is the most functional and it's the most also hypertrophic. Wrong. It just isn't the case. You can't have everything. So that's that. And as I wrote here, fanboys with small legs refuse to admit that they do it for looks. All right? It's okay to do pull-ups because you want a nice back. You don't have to be performant at it. If you feel more strongly towards looks, please come towards us, come towards the bodybuilding community. We will welcome you with open arms. You don't have to feel ashamed because you train for physique. It's okay. You don't have to pretend to care about performance. All right. And as I said, of course, what I just said, even though it could be taken as a dig, also speaks a very simple truth. Calisthenics works. It works. It grows muscle. Anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't understand hypertrophy and resistance training. It is an excellent mean, but at some point it becomes limited. Of course, you can always find ways around it. I've said it in the past. To me, you want a big and juicy back, pull-ups, weighted pull-ups, inverted rows, weighted also. You've taken care of a large portion of the muscles just right there via calisthenics. And if you're a little bit imaginative, you can really push the ball. The issue being that at some point, a lot of the lifts that are not loaded, that would allow you to really up the difficulty, are also extremely technical. So it becomes a question of, do I want to invest so many hours to be extremely proficient at a lift to be able to access the hypertrophic value of it? Or do I just want to do something that is easy to do and is going to give me the same results? Because again, there isn't a single lift in the calisthenic arsenal that cannot be replicated with weights. And calisthenic athletes get big as a byproduct. It's not the main pursuit. And therefore, you have to keep that in mind. It's really important. It's the same logic behind the front squat. Cool, you want to learn the front squat to have big legs? You could do something easier than front squats. You could. And that is coming from someone who loves front squats. Okay, now that I have taken a shit on calisthenics to an extent, I have to say good things about it. Because, as I said, I truly appreciate the practice and I find a lot of good things that are not discussed enough. The first being the romantic ideal of training anywhere. This to me is incredibly valuable, meaning that you can literally be anywhere. As long as you have your body on the ground, your body and not even a pull-up bar, anything that you can grab, you can train calisthenics. That is in itself amazing. And there are guys who got really, really far in terms of physique with only their body weight. That is possible. But of course, it's not optimal, right? It can be seen as a waste of time. But as the poetic mind would say, isn't it beautiful that you're able to grow the body with the body, right? The mass that you build comes from the mass that was already built. That is amazing, meaning that you can go and face the sea and have a full workout looking at the sea. What bodybuilder who squats and deadlifts can say that? I certainly can say that. When I train, I stare at myself in the mirror. It's not as spectacular, it's certainly not as inspiring, although some people would disagree. I am fairly exceptional to look at. But it's that thing that I've always loved. Like you can go into a 2-hour hike into the mountains and just say, you know what, I felt the fire, let's train. That's amazing. It's the reason why when we're talking consistency, the most consistent of any athletes I've ever seen were calisthenic athletes. Because you have no excuse. You just need your body to train. Or you need just a pair of rings or a pull-up bar. Stuff that you can literally carry on your back. I can't carry my barbell on my back. Can you imagine that with all of the plates like in a luggage? It's not possible, right? You guys get to do that, and that's amazing. You also have the purity of just using the body. To me, that's the reason why I also call calisthenics natural, is because you can't make it more simple than that. You're literally lifting with the body that was given to you at birth, and you are subliming the body by the means that were the most evident, that were right there. Meaning that if we are thinking about practices that most likely were used in early days, I'm talking like thousands and thousands of years ago, I cannot argue against the fact that most likely what started all of this is calisthenics. I'm sure that resistance training was first figured out by people who did calisthenics at some point or another. And at some point, labor and moving the weight started also being a thing. But people who wanted to develop the body, they started with calisthenics. And then it gave birth to loads, because people were like, if I just move the body through space, the body gets bigger and stronger. What if I load? What if I modify the angle? This is also the reason why, to me, weight training is a natural evolution of calisthenics. But some guys decide to just stay at calisthenics. That's a choice to make. So that's the first thing that I personally really appreciate. The second one is it keeps you humble and in check, because it forces you to lift your body. And I said that at the start of the video. It's incredibly sad to see how few people nowadays can move their body well. You tell them, hey, pick up that box, and you look at them, you cringe, because it's like they're trying to snap their spine in two. They don't know how to move. And therefore, it's incredibly important to always keep calisthenics in your program for one simple reason. It's going to keep you in check. Continuously, you're going to try and move the body, and if at some point you can't, this is a red flag. It shows that you're missing, there's something missing here. And I, in the past, regretted not doing that because I turned my back on calisthenics. As I said, I was a calisthenic boy, and I was really light and I had no legs. So when I was 165, 170, I could bang out 20 pull-ups like it was nothing. I could do push-ups like you wouldn't believe. I was really small. I was also really light, so it was easy for me to do these things. And at some point, I bought into the perma-bulk meme, and I bulked way too high for my frame. And I ended up, first off, fat, and secondly, completely incapable of moving. Meaning that I was literally waddling around like a penguin. I had no agility left, no mobility left. And you know why I got to that level? Because I stopped caring about how my body was moving through space. And if you do calisthenics, that's never going to happen. Because calisthenics are going to continuously remind you that, hey, you're bad at this, you're getting bad at this, what is happening? Why are you getting bad at this? Maybe you're putting much more fat than you think on your frame, and now all of these movements are really tough because not only are you not stronger because you didn't grow any muscles, you have to move a maximal load that wasn't there in the past. And the crows agree. So it's what I would call an excellent muscle/strength gouge. If your calisthenics suffer, something is wrong. If you're putting all of these plates on the bench, but you can't do push-ups anymore, something is wrong. Meaning that your absolute strength is starting to take over. And that might be good for a powerlifter, but for a bodybuilder, it's not. Because it means that you're most likely having a really strong advantageous leverage build-up, meaning you're getting fat. And maybe you don't realize it because your body dysmorphia is on full blast, but calisthenics will remind you of that. If you are getting stronger at bench and your push-ups regress, you're doing something wrong. If you're getting stronger at the row, but your pull-ups regress, you're doing something wrong. Because most likely the aspect of muscle/fat is skewed towards fat. And that's no good. Don't do that. Don't follow my example. Because I literally went from 20 pull-ups to then stopping doing calisthenics for 2 years. And when I tried to do them again, you know what? I could barely do 2 pull-ups. Barely. And it was dangerous too because my joints were screaming. I know a lot of guys who are really heavy and they practice what I call heavyweight calisthenics and they tear biceps. They mess up their triceps, their tendons, etc. Why? They're too heavy. They've gotten to a point where they are completely incapable of moving the body. And that's no bueno. Okay, if you're in this for physique, it's no good. Don't let yourself get to that point ever. So that's something that calisthenics, again, are going to offer you. And the last thing it's going to be actually these two last things. It's going to be that it hits body parts often neglected by compound movements. And this is the story behind that thumbnail, by the way, because the first picture was taken when I had a 495 deadlift. Okay, at the time at this picture, I had a 495 deadlift. I was 210. On the other picture, I'm also 210. I have a 485 deadlift. Look at the difference in the back. Right? It's not lighting. The lighting was actually better in the first picture because it was overhead lighting. The picture is a little bit further, but look at the difference in the back. Like one back is a fridge with no definition, no curvature of the lats. The other one looks like a back. It's sculpted. There's actual muscles. There's valleys. You actually see like the 3D pop. You know how I did that? Pull-ups. That's it. It's the only difference between those two pictures is pull-ups. In the first picture, I had stopped doing pull-ups. In the second, I've done them for 2 years. That's the difference. That's why you never turn your back on calisthenics, because if you do, you're going to end up with a small back, and you don't want that. And a lot of that is also the fact that calisthenics, as I said, keep you humble because your legs are not involved. This is sort of the flip side of this. Yeah, maybe calisthenic athletes don't use their legs much, but when they do decide not to use them, with pull-ups, for example, they know for a fact that they are doing it 100% with upper body. And therefore, they don't have to wonder. A lot of people, when they do row, they don't realize how much their legs are working. They don't realize how much they're putting with their legs until you make them do pull-ups or you make them do inverted rows, and they finally realize that they're actually really weak. I think the crows are having a fight outside. I gave them food earlier. Don't understand. Ingrates. All right. Now, I also want to talk about the recovery aspect because it's part of the reason why it's so effective for novices too, and why I like it so much. And I love, that's what I followed, I love an everyday full body routine with calisthenics as the main meal and the main focus of the program, because novices can actually recover from that, because they're not able to dig deep enough with calisthenics to make any serious damage, and therefore it can force them to be consistent day in and day out and get really good at proprioception. And that is across the board something that calisthenics have always been the king at. They are extremely easy to recover from. You can do pull-ups every single day. If you do pull-ups properly, you'll never have pain, you'll never hurt yourself, and you'll keep progressing. That is doable with pull-ups. I cannot really find or cite you any type of compounds that actually work like this. Some people would say, oh, the squat. Well, yeah, but the squat has a limit, meaning that unless you're really good with the way you load and you reduce the load on certain days, you could potentially squat every day. But if you squat every day with maximal loads all of the time, to failure, you're going to end up snapped up. There's no way around that. With pull-ups, you can literally go to failure every single day, do AMRAPs every single day, still progress. Of course, it has limitations at some point, just like any type of bodyweight only movement, but it's doable, and that's what I've done. Pull-ups every single training day. 40 to 80 pull-ups every training day. And that works. That has wielded amazing results. And they're also great for injury prevention. If you have lower back pain, if you have shoulder pain, dead hangs. They compress the spine, they compress the shoulders. Pull-ups by themselves, if you do them properly, will be extremely easy on the joints, especially if you vary the grips. Same for push-ups. People who have shoulder problems, do push-ups for a while. Rehab that shoulder, get that chest working. All of that is amazing. And we're talking about amazing things. I want to present to you my top 5 most favored calisthenic movements. These are, in my opinion, the best of the best. Starting with the pull-up. No explanation, I don't even need to explain why the pull-up is amazing. If you're training for looks and you don't do pull-ups, what even are you doing? 2, inverted rows. Same logic, it's going to be a test of upper body strength, a test of upper back strength, and you're going to be able to just modify the angle of everything you do. You're going to be able to squeeze, to stretch like a madman. It's going to feel amazing for the upper back. It's going to lead to growth. And you can weight the movement. This is also a movement that you could be doing 4 times a week if you wanted, because it's really easy to recover from. And the upper back is extremely gluttonous when it comes to volume. And guess what? Both pull-ups and inverted rows don't tax the lower back. Why do you think calisthenic athletes have such amazing upper backs? It's because they train it all the time, but they're not limited by their lower back because 1, the lift in itself doesn't tax the lower back, and 2, it's a movement that doesn't really has any risk of injuring that area. So you can do it literally every day and you get good results from it. But of course, it also means that you're going to have to get really good at calisthenics. And in that case, it's a pursuit and you have to make some sacrifices, as I said earlier. Number 3 is going to be push-ups. I love push-ups. I do push-ups every time I can. Even though technically I don't really need them for progression, I still do them because they're just fun. And if for anyone who wants to develop a good-looking upper body, push-ups, pull-ups, abs. Honestly, you can start building a good base from that, and then you're going to need to add more movements. Then we can speak about leg raises for the abs. One of my favorite exercises for the abs as well. If done properly, stretch, you get that perfect stretch of the entire core. It complements compound movements like nothing. Legs, if you do squats and deadlifts on certain days, on lower body days, please do leg raises. It's going to decompress your spine and it's going to stretch the abs that were braced during the movement. It's the perfect combo. And the last one is rings. And I have a full video on rings, just like I have a full video on pull-ups. They're both in the description. Rings are amazing. Just try rings. They're noob friendly, unlike what a lot of people might think. They're adaptable, you can take them anywhere. Now, to end the video on a negative note, because of course, the worst calisthenic movements, and keep in mind that this is again for hypertrophy, for bodybuilding. So the first one is going to be muscle ups. The muscle ups is the incarnation of a technical lift that people have confused with pure power. Because a lot of the power up, the muscle up is momentum. It's knowing how to get your body above the bar, and then once you're stabilized there, pressing up. It's really not the best for hypertrophy at all. Because it's too technique focused, as I said. It's a skill. Doing muscle ups is a skill. And therefore, if you want a jacked upper body, there are better ways and easier ways to attain. The front lever is in the same line. People ask me all the time, should I do front levers? If you want to, but again, the technical rating that you need to achieve to be able to do them, yes, will lead to a good looking upper body, but you could have gotten there so much faster with something else. And therefore, unless you have a passion for the lift and you want to be able to do the lift, don't do it. Then we have one-hand push-ups. One-hand push-ups, which are really a circus trick, meaning that if you look at the way people do one-hand push-ups, it's not a normal push-up and they remove a hand. The hand is here, their legs are sprawled like a spider. It's a weird thing where they do this with their upper back. It's cool to look at, but it's not really a push-up. And therefore, for muscle building, for pure muscle building, avoid that. Don't bastardize a beautiful and pure push-up to do something like this. Then we have the dragonfly. The dragonfly, which is, again, a movement that is going to really prioritize the ability to keep the leg to core ratio in favor of the core. Because if you have, and I'm going to use terms, if you have big glutes and you have a fat ass and you have big legs, dragonflies are almost impossible. Because now the center of gravity of your body is way too skewed towards the lower back. And therefore, it's just impossible. It's still a movement that can be done for people like me, for example, who have really big legs, but not in the fashion that you see calisthenic athletes do. It's amazing for the core, but again, to be able to get to that level, you have to sacrifice the legs. And you can get a big core without it. And the last one in the same vein again is going to be the planche. The planche requires a lot of stability, but it also requires to have a type of upper body dominance. Because it's much easier to balance yourself if all of the weight is towards where you're going to put your hands and not in the back. And that's the reason why also, if you manage to do a planche and you're actually thick, down low, that's amazing. That's an amazing accomplishment. It's the reason why I spoke about heavyweight calisthenics as well. Because even though people who want to be really good at calisthenics are going to prioritize skill-based movement for the legs, and they're going to tend to have more athletic, aesthetic looking legs, it's also true that there are some monsters that manage to have both. And this is impressive, right? When you manage to be really strong at lower body and really strong at upper body at the same time, and you marry compounds and calisthenics, not only are you big, but you also have managed to be efficient at two different facets of strength. And that to me deserves a round of applause because I'm certainly not in that group at all. I'm extremely weak at calisthenics. But still doesn't matter, you still need to do them. Even if you're weak, please still do them. You know why? Because even if you can barely do a few reps with your body weight, It might just mean that the movement is, and it not just might just mean, it means that the movement is challenging and therefore guess what? It's building muscle because it's difficult and therefore you need to do it. This is the gist of this video. Don't turn your back on calisthenics. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.